welcome to this episode of International Consulting Podcast. I am today with Laura Georgieff. She is a travel blogger and influencer for her own blog, Frugal for Luxury. Hello, Laura.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. And yourself?
I'm good, thank you.
So on top of being a travel blogger and influencer, you are also a digital nomad with kids, with child. You have several kids, right?
3 of them, yeah. They're aged 5, 7, and 8.
Whoa. And you are traveling together for 9 months now.
Right, yeah, we've been on the road for 9 months. We left our home in Orlando, Florida, back in January 2020 and visited the Pacific Islands when the COVID crisis hit the world. And instead of flying to Japan and visiting the Asian region, we flew to Europe. We have European passports that allowed us to come back in and spent some time isolating in Germany at my husband's mom's. And when at least the European continent reopened for travel, we left again. So we've been on the road again from, I guess, since June 15th. So it's been 2.5 months circling over Europe.
Wow, that's amazing. And you are traveling so with your whole family, your husband, your 3 kids, the 5 of you. It must
Absolutely.
take a lot of planning, or are you still able to work?
Yeah, it took a lot of planning. We spent about, I guess we've had the idea of that trip for about a year prior to leaving. We spent about 6 months planning, and there was that whole time right in the middle where, so you plan a lot at the beginning, you buy a few plane tickets, and then there's not much happening, kind of like planning your wedding. And then comes the rush of leaving, where you need to, make sure everything's ready. You've got all of your clothes together, all of the things you need to bring with you, put your house on the market, whatever you decide to do with some of your assets, and get going. So all in all, 6 to 9 months of planning. And then there's the daily planning. So I work quite a bit on my business and leave all of the planning up to my husband to figure out, and he's been amazing with that, thankfully. But I'd say he spends a good hour, 2 hours a day planning what we'll do the day before and looking at 2 or 3 days ahead of us. With the COVID situation, obviously the planning looks very different than it did at the beginning of the trip. We stopped planning for next week. We plan for tomorrow. We don't book any accommodations until the day off, because we never know that we'll actually get to the new country, get to the new place until a few hours before we need to sleep somewhere. So the planning looks very different, but all in all, there's just a lot of travel planning happening on a daily basis.
So your husband is planning and you are working?
And I work, yes. I have a blog. I'm a family lifestyle and family travel blogger and influencer. So I spend a ton of time behind the camera shooting my kids, and not much of it is staged. I just take a ton of pictures, which I spend a lot of time editing every day. So I can't fall behind because I have hundreds of pictures that I take every day. I'm behind the camera filming some of our experiences and some of the destinations. And then we get home, and once everybody's in bed, I use some of that time to get some work done on the blog and on social media. So there's just a lot of engaging, writing, editing, and publishing. So
you do everything. You write, you shoot videos, you do a video editing, you have an Instagram profile as well with photographs. So you do also some photo editing.
I do 100% of it. We shoot all of our own pictures, so we don't travel with a photographer. We just I do all of the photo taking. I try to edit them if there's a long stretch of road, because there's just going to be so many pictures and so much things to do in a very short amount of time once we get to the destination, that things need to happen throughout the day as well. And then there's posting on social media and make sure that I engage with my audience and some of the other people in the niche. And we have a YouTube channel, so I'll be editing some of those movies and posting them. And then anything that I write needs to be marketed on the different social channels, whether I spend time on Pinterest, Facebook, Twitter. I just need to make sure that the information gets in front of my audience. So all of that it's hard to put a number on it, but I would say I work, usually my cell phone tells me that I've spent on average 8.5 hours of my day on my phone. A lot of that happens very late into the night. I do look outside of the window when we travel. I'm not just on my phone doing some work, but I do spend a fair amount of time working. So I'd say I put in 7-8 hours a day. It just happens when we're not sightseeing and doing some of the travel life or homeschooling, because we homeschool as well, obviously.
I know that a lot of people that would like to become travel influencer or blogger, they think it's as easy as taking pictures and sharing them with their networks, but it's much more complicated than that, right?
It really is. When we work with destinations, I think it takes me 40 to 60 hours for me to get everything ready to a point where I can be proud of sending out that last email saying, hey, this is the coverage that I provided for your destination. So we can go on a 2-hour canoe trip. We just did one of those in Finland last week. It's a 2-hour canoe trip. It's about 40 to 50 hours of work behind that. So there's a lot more than just shooting and posting. There's a lot of editing, a lot of things going into making sure that the information gets to where I want it to get to. There's just a lot of work behind being an influencer and a blogger if you want to do your job well and be successful.
I have a question. Do you have a backlog now?
I have probably enough content for the next 3. I'm actually worried because I probably have enough content for the next 3 years of posting. On average, when we're home, I post about 3 articles a week. I'm just worried about posting pictures in 3 weeks of my kids being 5, 7, and 8. When they'll be 8, 10, and 11, because that's going to start looking weird. So I'm going to be working through some of that content quicker, and then keeping some of my most general content for later into the time. But I have a list on my phone, just notes that I take of, article ideas popping up. So the good thing is I'm probably not going to be hitting that writer's block anytime soon, but there's just going to be a lot of work coming in, which is great. It's a great problem to have when you're a blogger.
Well, I also have a backlog myself, so I totally understand.
It's a good thing.
And I don't even have a family to take care of. So I really don't understand how you can do everything. So
I don't know how it happens. It needs to happen, and so it does. It's one of those things where you're forced into a situation that you haven't really planned for it, but it needs to happen, and it does. I don't go to bed before 1:30, 2 a.m. That's just how it is. That's when I get too tired to produce good work. But I could be working like I did at home and work all day and still feel like I don't have enough time on my hands. I just need to be a lot more productive when I work today and use those little cracks into the day where I can fit in a little bit of work. There's just never, every second of my day has a purpose. There's never a time where I just lay back. I'm not going to go and take a nap. That nap time is going to be used for everything that just needs to happen. Because if I do take that time off, then that 1 a.m. deadline is pushed to 2 a.m. It happens, but I do have a backlog, so I could be doing a lot more. Could definitely be doing a lot more.
So actually, the meaning of digital nomad with a family, it's not only work, it's not only travel and enjoy time with your family, it's a lot of planning.
Yeah. So a lot of time, so I'll tell people that we're planning that 18-month trip, or I'll tell people we'll be out of the country for 18 months and traveling, obviously. And the first thing that I hear is, oh, you're so lucky. There's no luck to this. I don't believe that there's any luck to what is happening today. We weren't handed plane tickets. We weren't handed a lifestyle or a setup to that lifestyle. It's been years in the making. We have been saving everything we've earned for the last 12 years. We've been raising our kids in a way that allows us to go for that experience. None of it is luck because of the amount of work and the concessions that we've been doing day after day. We don't eat out ever, which for an American family, we're from Orlando, Florida, is not happening. People do not understand why we'll cook 3 meals a day. That allows us to be where we are today. But those are some of the concessions that we've had to make to get there. So there's no luck to that. And then people telling me, oh, you're on an 18-month vacation. So ask my kid 5 minutes ago who was learning how to divide in the hundreds with the remainder, and she'll tell you, how is that a vacation, Mom? They're working on their schooling. We homeschool them 7 days a week because that's a way for us to spend less time on it, but a little bit of it every day helps us get moving into the day. this is not a vacation. I mean, our kids are moving forward with their school. This is not a vacation. We're just living differently, and we're living location independent from, from a home, a brick and mortar home. So none of that is related to luck. There's just a lot of things going on. But in February, we spent several hours doing our taxes, just like, we would have at home. We're not on vacation. You would not be doing your taxes on vacation. We still shop at the grocery store. We're not out eating. Our life is the same. It's just lived in a different place every night, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, being a digital nomad doesn't mean being on holiday, but it means working kind of from wherever you like, or more like wherever you can.
Exactly.
Want.
Yes.
But you still have to take care of the normal life, like cook, pay your taxes, and
everything else happens. It just happens differently. It's homeschooling happens at the airport. It happens in a train. It happened a few nights ago in a cabin inside a camping ground that did not have a table, so it happened on a bed. If we were home and homeschool, but the kids would probably be in school, but if we were home and homeschooling, we'd be sitting at a table, the same table every day, and we'd have that routine. Our routine needs to be adapted and flexible. But life happens the same way as it does at home. The kids will still have days where they're not feeling great. They're not, we're all just human beings and living our life differently, but nothing that we would be doing at home is looked over. We're doing the same things that we would be doing at home.
And you are still working full time while taking care of, on top of that, homeschooling your kids. Like at home, you would.
They'd be at school. They were at school at home. The big question now is, what do we do when we go back? We love homeschooling. We really do. And in about 2 hours of time every day, an hour and a half, 2 hours, we cover as much as they do in a whole school day. We like the independence that it gives us. We like the flexibility that it gives us. We usually wake up and it's the first thing we do in the morning. But today, for example, we left for a hike very early to beat some of the crowds. And so homeschooling happened from 3 to 4 p.m. And that's totally okay. We're homeschooling so we can do that. And we also love how much the kids are getting from traveling. So we are homeschooling, but also world schooling. So the world school image or concept would be not teaching them school subjects and them learning from our travel experiences. We still homeschool, so we teach them the English and the language arts and the math, but everything else they get from traveling. So we'll visit sites, historical sites, and this turns into their World War I history lesson. We're learning about the oceans, and there's just, when I sent out their package at the end of last year to the lady that looked over their work, I came up with a number of topics that was just insane. They learned so much more than they did at school, and they remember it because they lived it. So yes, there's just a lot of it happening, but we love homeschooling, and homeschooling on the road is just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, actually, homeschooling on the road, they are actually experiencing much more than they would probably at home, just staying at the same place the whole week, more or less.
And they're not forced to learn something to learn it. They learning because they experience it, because they're interested in it. So we'll go to that. We were in Slovenia and we hit a battlefield from World War I with ruins from old houses where some of the generals lived in. And that turned into that whole World War I discussion of, what happened and why. But it happened here, so you're feeling it. So now you're not just learning about it, it's inside of you. You've had all of those feelings. We went to the unfortunate concentration camps in Poland, and that sparked a lot of questions, and people are asking me, are they not too young? Why would you take your kids? Those things happen. They'll be learning. My daughter's entering the 4th grade. It might have even been part of her 3rd grade. I remember learning about it back in elementary school. There's no reason why she can't see what happened, and it turned into a discussion of, this is what you have, this is your lifestyle, but had you been born in a different family in a different time, this could have been your life. And those things, they understood it so much better than learning about it in a textbook. And it's inside of them now. They can tell you the history because they've lived it.
They have memories instead of lessons learned. Well, they also have
Yeah,
this.
and it's not, and we're not feeding them the information where it gets boring and they don't understand why they have to learn about the topic. It's self-led, so they ask the questions. It's they lead their education on the field. We just give them the tools and the opportunities to learn, and then it's 100% their question. If we take a tour, those 4 tour guides, I mean, our kids will ask hundreds of questions, and you can tell who's good with kids and who isn't. But they can ask you a number of questions. You know, their intellect keeps on going around, and they're very, very curious from the experiences that they've lived. I think it's a great concept.
Yeah, it sounds like. I'm not sure if we talked about it already, but how old are your kids?
So our youngest daughter is 5. She turned 5 during the trip. Actually, they all celebrated a birthday since we left. So they're now 5, and then our son is 7, and our daughter is 8. So we try to do something special on their birthdays. We can't give them things because we have a certain amount of real estate space that can travel with us, and that's 3 backpacks. So they get experiences, and it's not like we let them choose. We'll just try to do something different. So our daughter celebrated in Fiji. She turned 8 in Fiji, actually on a cruise through the Northern Islands. And so we took her snorkeling, and then on the ship, we let her get her nails done and get a massage. And our son turned 7 in Rome, and he went to gladiator school, where he learned how to become a sworn-in gladiator. So we just try to make it interesting and a memorable experience. And they remember that a lot more than the toy that they got last year, that they have no idea what they got or why. They never played with it, most likely. So those experiences just mean a lot more for them today.
For sure. And regarding homeschooling, also, it's not so complicated because they are more or less the same age and at similar levels.
Yeah, we wanted to time this trip before they start the 6th grade. Once they enter middle school, you really need to be a lot more focused on all of the topics. There are things that they absolutely have to know. We could still world school them during that time, but we felt like that sweet spot where they'll still have memories, or at least memories of the feelings, because I don't believe our 4 and 5-year-old will remember all of the images, but she'll have that trip inside of her, and that lifestyle living somewhere within her. But that sweet spot of elementary school children where they're not missing their friends too much yet. They don't really have a very, big social life that they'll be missing out on. They're missing out on some of the sports. So we're essentially skipping a year and a half of them, getting better at their sports, but we're so active throughout the day. They're not losing their endurance. But this was a sweet spot where it's still easy enough for us to teach them, and we can still get our work done in about an hour and a half, 2 hours. So we see our kindergartner will get her work done in 30 minutes or an hour, but the 3rd grader will need, close to 2 hours on some days. And we're very strict with the homework because we want to make sure we're not losing out on, we're not falling behind. But this just seemed like a sweet spot where we could travel and have them continue to be on track with schooling without us putting in too much effort into it either.
Yeah, actually, the sports issue isn't only for kids. I had the same, like when I went for a year-long world tour, doing sport, being regular in one sport is very complicated. When you are traveling, you don't know where you will be, where you can practice.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, they were big in gymnastics, and we have a singer. So those 2 things are just things that they're missing out on. But we're able to keep them active enough that I don't think they'll have fallen behind. They just probably wouldn't have moved forward with their group or their class. Outside of that, it's really just up to us to keep their brains going and make sure that they don't fall behind in school. And they're actually moving forward a bit quicker than we want to, but they're just learning so quickly. They're sponges, and being able to spend one-on-one time with them every day, they learn a lot faster than they did in school. It's mind-blowing. I mean, that concept is absolutely fascinating.
So it looks like it's an amazing experience for your kids, at least.
Yeah.
What
Yes.
about you and your husband as parents? Are you able
love it.
do you feel like you are successful in what you are doing?
We are. We wish COVID wasn't a thing, but that's the hand that we were dealt with. Just it's the year that we picked. It wasn't a good year to travel, obviously. But we're getting to do a lot more than I think many of the other people that are stuck at home and are not don't have the ability to move, or in a space where it's unsafe to travel. So thankfully we found a way to travel that keeps us and other people around us safe. We feel successful in that sense that we're discovering things on a daily basis. We're learning as much as the kids. I learned things on, like I was saying, World War I, and we learn things on volcanoes and earthquakes. I mean, incredible things that we're learning every day. I could tell you, I go to bed every single day and there's something new that I can tell you I learned about today. And we're growing as a family. We're so much closer than we were when we left, because we've left behind that 9 to 5, the stress of going to work, getting your work done, coming home, having to deal with the kids, that you get home, you take them to sports, you come, you need to quickly cook and put them in bed, and there's just all of that routine where we lose ourselves and we lose touch with each other. We're now, and people will warn you that travel full-time, watch out, you'll be together 24/7, you'll get on each other's nerves. Not at all. We're so much closer than we were when we left, or at any point in time in our marriage. We actually celebrated 10 years our 10-year anniversary on the road. And it was a good time for me to reflect on how much we understand each other today versus even just 9 months ago when we left. We're a team. So we know what each other needs to get going. We're that tag team where the kids will get their work done and the house will get packed and we'll get going, and I have time to do my work and he has time to plan. It's just a symbiosis that was created. That's beautiful. I think we're being successful from a personal standpoint as well as a travel standpoint. We're seeing a lot. We're seeing a ton every day. We're experiencing a lot, and I think we're creating amazing memories for our family.
Oh, that's a big surprise. So you are closer together while traveling and being together the whole day than before, when you were living the corporate life and the daily routine.
So much more. People will tell us when there's a very tight community on Instagram, and then we've met a lot of the families in real life, of those full-time traveling families, and they'll tell us, every once in a while, just go into a hotel and get yourself 2 rooms, because one room you'll be able to close the door off, and the other room, so to give one parent some time alone, and then in the other room the other parent can take care of the kids, or make sure you have times where you let one of the spouses go into a cafe and have time for themselves. We don't feel that need at all. We've been together the last 9 months 24/7. There hasn't been a time where we went on a date or we walked into a cafe alone, because we don't need it. We really don't feel like we would benefit from that. We really enjoy living all of this together.
Oh, that's very, very interesting. So actually, what would you recommend other families that are thinking about like living their corporate life to become digital nomads? What would you recommend them to do and to think about?
I would make sure that I have a strong setup at home. There are 3 categories of people traveling out there. They're the ones that sell all of their assets. So say you sell the house and you sell the cars and all of your stuff, and you leave with a pool of money, and that pool of money you'll be eating out of, and that it might afford you a year and a half, 2 years of travel. And then the downside of that, in my opinion, is yes, you'll travel and you'll have great experiences, but eventually you'll need to come home. And unless you've left a piece of that pool of money somewhere waiting for you, you'll come home and probably move in. We see a lot of those families move in with their parents because there's nowhere to move to. You're not going to get a job immediately after coming back. There's the second group where people work online and they're able to travel while sustaining some sort of corporate life where they have their own companies. That's a great way to travel, especially if you want to travel very on the long term, because you're not really stuck in time. you'll need a lot more time to get your work done properly. Because if you work for a company, you'll need to have hours that you're available. You'll need to answer into a boss. If it's your own company, you have a lot more flexibility. And as long as you can bring in money, you'll be able to keep going. You just need to make sure that you have an internet connection, that you're in places. You might just visit more urban areas just because you'll need to have that time at home every day where you actively work. And then there's the system that we did where we left once we were financially independent. So free, by that I mean free of mortgages and loans. And we put our house in the market. So once the house was free of a mortgage, we put the house on the market, on the rental market, and there's income coming in every month from tenants. Now the tenants can leave, which is something that's happening in our situation because of COVID, that had to leave the house, but no rental income means no travel, so you have to find a new tenant. But that also, you know, as long as there's a tenant, you can keep on moving, and it becomes a lot easier to come up with a daily budget because you know how much you're getting every month, and that transfers into a daily budget that you can use. Those are the 3 ways to do it. But what I would say is make sure that you're in a position to be location and financially independent, where you're not going to be needing to be in a certain place to get your work done, or heading home because you're running out of money. Once you have that set up, the world is open to you. You do, you know, as you please within your budget.
So actually that is your case. You are a digital nomad, meaning you are working wherever you are, and you have some income
coming from our rental property. Exactly. Which means that when we go home, our property is our home. We get, you know, we move right back in, and the business continues, and so we have a stream of income when we get home as well.
But you are also working online.
Yes, very much so. Yes, working with destinations mostly today because of the nature of our travel. A little bit harder to work with brands that deliver products, but able to work with brands that deliver online products. So there's a little bit of an income stream. It's not a huge part of my work, but being able to build my relationship with destinations and show new destinations some of the work that I've done in the past with others is something that's extremely valuable for me. I can't put a dollar amount on it. It's not paying for my morning coffee. However, it's something that is going to deliver in the long term. So the blog keeps growing. I haven't had to stop working. I'm able to work as I go by being dedicated and putting in a lot of work. But it works. My business is flourishing, and I haven't had to stop anything. I'm able to work as we go. So we're digital nomads in that way, that we're still working as we move forward.
And would you say that you are working more on your blog, on your Instagram, on your YouTube channel? Where do you?
Instagram probably takes me the biggest amount of time, just because I'm a perfectionist, and nothing is going to go on my Instagram unless I have edited the photo, not even in a 15-second story, which sometimes drives me nuts because it's a 15-second story that, you know, might go away. But I like to show the best of the destinations, and I like to show what it truly feels like to travel with kids to those destinations. But I can't, you know, I don't snap a picture and then put it up online. I'll be slightly editing. There's no major editing happening on my channels because I want people to know exactly what they're getting into. I hate getting to a place and I've seen that beautiful photo and there's nothing to it, and you get there and you're just disappointed. So that doesn't happen on my channel. However, I take thousands of photos, oh gosh, and then I edit, you know, some of them, the best ones, and I handpick them and edit them, and then they go online. And I spend a lot of time curating my stories because I create those permanent highlights that a lot of my audience uses to plan their trips. But it could be 2 years down the road. So say we're in Norway now, I'll have that Norway highlight with all of the places we've been to, all of the things that we've done. And people will use those story highlights to plan their own trip. And that gives me a lot of satisfaction to know that I'm helping other families live some of the experiences that we've lived. And if it's good enough, it's going to get onto the Instagram. So I spend a lot of time, just because Instagram is also the way the algorithm works, I need to spend a lot of time engaging with my audience, which I love doing, but also engaging with other people within the family travel niche, to make sure that, you know, the algorithm, which is that big scary cloud above our heads, shows my content to the audience. So Instagram takes a lot of time, and as soon as I get into editing for YouTube or putting in a blog, it takes hours. It's just, there are hours of work, but most of my time is spent editing photos and posting to Instagram.
And in your opinion, where should an aspiring digital nomad family start working if they want to become influencer like you? On which platform should they spend the most effort?
So I think Instagram is still the biggest thing out there. Brands look up to Instagram a lot because it's visual and it conveys emotions. I've never worked with any brand or destination that did not require some sort of posting to Instagram, some sort of sharing to Instagram, even if just a story. It's a very visual platform where people can engage. The only flaw that it has, in my opinion, is it makes it hard to share content. So I'll see somebody's post and it's a lot harder for me to share it with my audience than a Facebook, for example, where the post is going to live there on forever. You don't really have that opportunity to become viral on Instagram as much as other platforms. Then TikTok came up and became this huge thing, and companies really started looking for TikTok influencers, but that's sort of dying out. It became a big thing overnight, but never really stayed on. So I would definitely work on Instagram from a branding standpoint. And then Facebook is just a really good platform to get your Facebook and Pinterest to get your content viral, where people will be able to massive share it with their own friends and family. It's just a lot easier to get your content in front of people's eyes there than it is on Instagram. But you share differently on all of the platforms, anyways. It's not a one size fit all, where I'm gonna post the same thing on all of my platforms. They all have. I deal with the platforms and that audience very differently from one to the other.
Okay, and now with your experience, so 9 months now traveling with your family and working as a digital nomad, which tips would you give to aspiring families but want to go on the road?
Be flexible. You need to be. It's a daily thing. And especially as we're traveling during COVID, it's just the whole flexibility word became that huge thing that I can't even completely explain because it would take a whole podcast. Be flexible. Just know that things will not work out the way you expect them to work, and that's another thing when people tell me, oh, it's a long-term vacation, and I tell them I don't expect this to go well. I do not. I expect us to get stolen from. I expect us to scratch the car. I expect the kids to have meltdowns. It's life. You need to be flexible. Some days the kids will wake up and not be in a good mood, but they're human beings. Some days we'll wake up and don't feel like moving, but things need to happen. So be flexible with, I think, or have that mindset that you will need to adjust the plan. It's not going to go as planned. You'll make the best out of it, but you'll need to adapt, and then learn to let go. Not everything is going to be perfect. Like I said, you'll get to a destination and you thought it was going to be that wow factor, and it's just not going to be something you're all that interested in. So learn to let go of a lot of the emotions. Learn to let go of the plan, which ties back to being flexible. That's my biggest advice. And then if you're traveling with kids, don't overstress the schooling part. That was one of the biggest thing when we were planning this trip. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do with the kids? I can't let them fall behind. Which system am I going to use? It's okay. They're going to learn so much more than they would at school anyways. And all you need to make sure that you give them is math skills. That's just not something that they'll be learning, from walking down the forest. And then just make sure that their language arts is worked on. But like I said, even a 4th grader is going to take max 2 hours a day if we work on something really complicated. And then if you want to, you can homeschool the whole year and cut it down to about an hour a day and homeschool throughout the summer. The kids don't know any different. You no longer have a weekend. You no longer have a school vacation. That does not happen. Your days are all the same. You're not in that routine where so when I say they're all the same, and I say you are not in a routine, it doesn't make sense, because you think, well, then you have a routine, all of your days are the same. They are. You're not you don't just shut down at 5 p.m. because it's now end of the day and you come home and sit in front of the TV. That does not happen. Some of our days go into the middle of the night because that's how late we get to a destination. So just don't overstress the schooling part. It will happen. The little amount of math and language that you need to teach the kids when you have an entire year to do it, there's no reason to stress about it. So yeah, be flexible, learn to let go, and don't overstress the school. Those would be my top 3 advice.
Okay, very, very good tips and actionable. And maybe the last tip would be actually to contact you to start their own blog, right?
I have so many people contact me. I actually started a blogging school. So I have an online school for learning how to put a blog together. Learning how to work with your social media. So I have 2 classes going on. I get contacted by so many families and I love connecting with them, and they usually get answers that are 3 or 4 times as long as they should really be. And but hopefully they find some of those tips helpful. A lot of people will contact me on this schooling. People get really nervous about it, which I was a nervous wreck before we left, and I had a few friends who homeschooled, and I was crying with them, and what am I going to do? How is this going to work? And that was one of their advice. It's going to be okay. Just you have to believe that the process is going to work, and it does. If I could just calm myself down from a year ago, I would today, because it's no big deal. And then, yeah, families just asking about destinations and how, the whole process is working. How do you buy your plane tickets? How much do you plan in advance? And what should I pack? And all of those things that I've been having running lists for a whole year, 6 months, 9 months, trying to fill in the blank. I have the experience with, and hopefully can help other families with planning their dream year and a half, 2 years on the road.
Hopefully, yeah. Well, that was a very interesting discussion. Before we finish, maybe you would like to do a closing statement and tell us a little bit more about what services or consulting you offer to families that are interested.
Yeah, of course. Of course, yeah. So my channels, they're all under the same handle. We're Frugal for Luxury. The reason behind the name is that frugal lifestyle that we've always lived and continue on living to afford the luxury of traveling. So it's a name that I find myself having to explain because it doesn't always make sense. But it's all that money that you're putting on the side doesn't mean that you're cheap or anything. It means that you're affording luxuries somewhere else because that money is still being spent. So that's our handle on all of the social media pretty much. And what we offer is really an inspiration for travel families to make remarkable memories with their children, whether at home when we work on our lifestyle piece of the blog or on the road when we work on the travel site piece. And I do have an online class on Teachable where I teach people how to monetize their blog, how to start a blog in a way that will get monetized within 6 months to a year, and how to use the social media in that sense. So that's us in a nutshell. We don't know how long the world tour will keep on, continuing, but hopefully as long as we can, and hopefully we inspire other families to seek out those, especially now with COVID. We've really tried to put as many lesser known destinations, safe destinations on people's radars because they're so worth. Like I said, we were just in Poland. I think we would have never been there if it wasn't for COVID. Those places are so worth visiting. Oh, I feel bad for some of them not being known, but there's still that little gem and there's that sweet spot where families need to get there. So that's us in a nutshell. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot for having joined this episode of International Podcast. We talked about Digital Nomad. It was very interesting. Thank you very much, Laura.